Hello everyone, I'm Andrea from Andrea Flipping Unique. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, thanks for joining. So every year for Christmas, I like to make at least one handmade gift. Last year, I made stuff out of stained glass, and this year I wanted to try doing something out of wood. So continue watching and I'll show you how I made these wood veneer ornaments. I started off by drawing my design on a piece of paper. I just wanted to do circles, so I found a cup that was a good size and just traced it, but you can do anything that you can imagine. Christmas trees, squares, candy canes, anything that you can think of. I did want this ornament to have an ornament cap on it, but I also wanted it to be symmetrical. So before I cut out my design completely, I did go ahead and fold it in half and made sure that I did have a little bit of extra paper on the top. I found a small circle object to trace to use as the part where the hook goes in, and what I did was lined up the middle of it onto the fold of the paper and then just traced that one half of it. I then went in and freehand the cap portion of it, and when I was happy with the shape, then I cut the whole thing out completely. After my design was cut out, I then went ahead and placed it on a piece of wood and traced it out. I'm using 1/4" plywood because it's what I had in my scrap pile, but you can use whatever kind of wood that you want. If you've been with me for my last couple of videos, you might have heard me mention that I really wanted to get a bandsaw. If you're new here and don't know what I'm talking about, I mainly do furniture flips and restorations, and my last couple of projects I've been building bases, and it's been a little bit difficult to do that with my jigsaw. So I've been wanting to get a bandsaw, and I'm finally happy to say that I have one. So after I had all of my ornaments traced out, I did go ahead and cut them out on my bandsaw. You can also use a jigsaw for this, and if you don't want to cut anything out, you can also go to the craft store and buy pre-made wood ornaments. After my ornaments were cut out, my next step was to work on the wood veneer. Because I was going to be working with really small pieces, I decided to put on my contact cement first. However, it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. You are supposed to let contact cement dry before you put your two pieces together. However, it took me a little bit longer to cut all of mine out, and my glue ended up drying a little bit too much, so I ended up having to put glue on the tiny pieces anyway. So I would suggest, if you are going to do this method, to have all of your pieces drawn out first on your veneer and then glue it, and then quickly cut them out and attach them to your ornament. I also want to note that I am using veneer that I had on hand from different furniture projects. If you don't normally work with furniture and you don't plan on ever using wood veneer other than making these ornaments, a cheaper alternative would be to use iron-on edge banding. After the glue had dried, I then went ahead and started cutting all of my pieces. I wanted the ornament cap to have the same curve as the ornament itself, so I took the glass that I used to trace out the ornament and an X-Acto knife and cut along that curved edge. Other than the curved part, I made sure that the piece I was cutting was slightly larger than where I was going to be placing it. That way I could go back and cut it with my X-Acto knife and it would be completely flush. At this point, you want to make sure that the curve of the wood veneer lines up with the curve on the ornament, and if it doesn't, then make any necessary adjustments as needed, because once you glue these pieces down, it's going to be very difficult to remove them. The next piece is going to be the start of the stripes on your ornament, and this one you want to make sure that you have that same curve. I took my same cup, except this time I did trace it with my pencil. I found it a little bit easier than using the X-Acto knife. The only difference on this piece is the other side of it, you're going to want to make a straight line. This is where you can start to get really creative, and you can go as thin or as thick with this piece as you want. You can even get super creative and do some squiggle marks or some zigzags. Just keep in mind that whatever you do on this piece, you have to do on the next piece so that they fit together like a puzzle. After I was done drawing everything out, I went ahead and cut it and then made sure that the curve of this piece lined up with the curve on the other piece. I didn't do anything fancy with the rest of my stripes. They were all cut using straight edges. but I did play around with the thickness. I alternated between walnut and oak, and I even played around with the direction of the wood grain. After everything was cut out, the next thing I had to do was to apply the contact cement to the ornament itself, and then I also had to reapply it to the veneer pieces. After the glue had dried, then it was time to attach my veneer to the ornament. If you are using contact cement, make sure that everything is lined up before you stick it, because once it gets stuck, it's really hard to remove it. Once everything was placed, I did go back over it with a piece of wood wrapped in a cloth just to make sure that everything was good and firmly pressed together. I then went in and trimmed off any excess using an X-Acto knife and sanded down any rough edges with 220 grit sandpaper. I didn't film it, but after I was done sanding, I went ahead and drilled a hole into the top of it so that I could attach my ribbon to it. After the sanding was done, then came the fun part, and that was to finally decorate these. I chose to use my stain making kit, that way I can make any color that I wanted. You can also choose to paint wash these, you can use normal stains, or you can even seal them as is. After the stain had dried, then it was time to seal them. I chose to use a spray-on sealant for these in particular, only because sometimes when you're brushing sealant on this stain, the pigment can lift up a little bit, and I didn't want the colors to run together. After the sealant had dried, the only other thing left to do was to attach a ribbon. I'm using this vintage ribbon that my mom gave me. Hi, Mom! But you can use whatever you like. If you want to use string, yarn, you can even use normal ornament hooks. Also, hi to my dad, because I know my dad's watching too. Hi, Dad! I hope this has inspired you to create your own Christmas gifts this year. And like always, let me know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to see furniture flips, restorations, and the occasional DIY just like this one. Thank you for spending some time with me, and I'll talk to y'all soon.